They didn't care about interstellar rules, about chemical balances or diplomatic codes. They cared about results and survival, and if pushed far enough, revenge. The war had been the turning point. 60 cycles ago, the Union of Pure Species had declared Earth an anomaly to be corrected. They had launched a surgical strike, 7 fleets, armed with precision annihilators and entropy charges. The mission was labeled Operation Clean Route. The plan was simple: remove the species before it spread. It was the last unified military operation ever launched by the Union. 3 fleets vanished en route. One sent back footage of their own ships imploding in synchronous silence. Their crews found fused to the walls. One fleet made it to orbit, only to be met by orbital stations painted in graffiti and rigged with something the humans called fun gifts. No survivors, only 2 fleets made landfall. That was when they learned what humans were capable of when cornered. They had expected resistance. What they hadn't expected was the humans' ability to turn an entire planet into a death trap. Oceans boiled. Forests turned to clouds of acid. Satellites exploded into clusters of kinetic darts that pierced even Zarn battle armor. And worse, the humans didn't mourn their losses. They laughed. They moved through rubble with makeshift weapons, flanked armored beasts with thermal knives made from melted rebar, and created traps so savage they were later banned in interstellar warfare. The final footage from the ground teams was shaky, confused, and haunting. One Zilari captain cried out as he tried to flee, his eyes wide as a single human, no armor, shirtless, bleeding, charged at him with nothing but a bent metal pipe. "I don't know how," the Emperor had said back then, during the emergency summit, "but I know who." So he requested one, just one, as a guard, not a fleet, not a battalion, not a squad, just one human. The request shocked the assembly, but no one dared question it twice. And Earth? They sent one. He didn't arrive in a ship of splendor. He came in a corroded transport with a single bag, a coat slung over one shoulder, and a badge made of scrap metal that simply read Ray. He didn't bow. He didn't kneel. He just looked at the Emperor, nodded once, and took his place beside the throne. From that day forward, no assassination attempt ever made it within 10 meters. One would-be attacker was found suspended from the ceiling by his own intestines. Another woke up in a freight container orbiting a gas giant with no suit and a single note taped to his forehead. "Try again." The guards around the palace began standing straighter. The ministers started whispering less. Even the Emperor's voice, once echoing and distant, seemed more grounded with the human nearby. He never spoke out of turn. He never asked for anything. He just watched. And maybe that's what unsettled the assembly most of all. The silence, the waiting, the knowing. Because humans didn't move unless they had to. And when they had to, someone died. Rumors spread that he trained by wrestling solar bears on Titan, that he drank poison recreationally just to build tolerance, that he once stared down a Sigrian death priest until the priest renounced his faith. But those who served beside him knew better. He was smart, too smart. He listened to everything. He noticed everything. He once interrupted a trade negotiation with the Kelmari syndicate by throwing a pen across the room, striking the lead negotiator square in the eye. When questioned, he simply replied, he was lying. He was right. The Kelmari had laced the offered goods with a bio-neurotoxin. He didn't smile after. He didn't celebrate. He just sat back down. "He's broken," someone whispered once in the mess hall. "They broke him in the war." "No," another replied, quieter. "He broke them." Now he stood beside the throne in a hall lined with gold and obsidian, arms crossed, eyes scanning every twitch and shift in the room. The Emperor motioned slightly with one bony finger, and the assembly quieted. A new delegation had arrived. The Graaltok, 6-limbed beasts who considered humans beneath even insult. They snarled as they entered, cloaked in skins and feathers, their eyes flicking toward the throne, and then pausing on him. He didn't move, but he saw them. He saw everything. And for a second, the Graaltok hesitated. Just for a moment. That was all it took. They had already lost. They just didn't know it yet. The Graaltok's hesitation didn't go unnoticed. The ministers glanced at each other behind their shimmering visors, and a low vibration passed through the court. silent but unmistakable. They're afraid. Not of the emperor, not of the guards lining the chamber. Just him, the Graaltok war leader, a mountainous brute with tusks like sculpted rock, stepped forward and grunted in his native tongue. A synthetic voice translated through a throat-mounted speaker. "We do not acknowledge the presence of prey among sovereigns. Move it." No one breathed. The ministers froze mid-blink. The translator's final echo hung in the air, like a noose waiting to drop. The human didn't move. The emperor didn't speak. He didn't need to. This wasn't a moment for politics. It was a test, and the human always passed. After a long pause, the war leader made a mistake. He took one step forward, just one. The human raised a single finger. Everyone expected a threat, a warning, maybe even a display of strength. But instead, the human pointed upward, casual, like he was spotting a leak in the ceiling. The war leader turned just enough to glance up. The ceiling exploded. 2 Graaltok guards fell from the upper tier, their bodies spinning in freefall, limbs bent in impossible angles. They hit the polished floor with twin cracks, sending feathers and armor shards flying like ash. The human didn't flinch, didn't lower his hand. "Ambush," he said, just that one word. Security scrambled. Alarms sounded. Ministers ducked behind golden pillars. The Graaltok backed away, weapons drawn, but then stopped when they saw the human walking forward. He didn't run. He never ran. He walked like time itself made space for him. The war leader barked in panic, but the human didn't even blink. He stopped just close enough for everyone to feel it, the gravitational pull of a predator who knew how this would end. "There were 7 on the roof," the human said calmly. "I left 2 alive. One's unconscious. The other's watching right now." As if on cue, a figure plummeted past the windows, screaming as it fell toward the lower atrium. No body was ever recovered. "Your move," he said. The war leader snarled, but something behind his eyes cracked. Not just fear, compliance. The kind that came when instinct, not diplomacy, took over. He dropped to one knee, not to the emperor, but to the human. It wasn't protocol, it wasn't respect, it was survival. From that day, the Graaltok never sent another assassin. They never raised their voices in court again. They barely spoke unless spoken to. After the incident, the human went back to his place beside the throne, like nothing had happened. The ministers slowly rose from cover. One of them, Minister Varen, who had once led a campaign to ban all non-telepathic species from security posts, approached and bowed low. "Thank you," he said, voice shaking. The human looked at him and replied, "Don't thank me. Be better at your job." Varen didn't take offense. He just bowed lower and backed away. He'd learned his place. The human's reputation grew from there, and with it came a phenomenon no one could have predicted: stability. The outer systems, once plagued by endless skirmishes and pirate raids, began calming. Even systems that had never bowed to the Empire started negotiating, not out of allegiance, not even out of greed, but because he might show up. There were sightings, unconfirmed of course, but the stories spread like wildfire. A warlord's moon fortress reduced to slag hours after refusing a tribute. A mercenary fleet found floating, engines melted from the inside. No life signs aboard except for a scrap of human clothing in the captain's chair. Once, a planetary governor in Sector 19 tried extorting a mining colony for protection credits. When word got out, the governor fled to an uncharted system. He returned 4 days later, pale and twitching, and handed over every credit he had, plus interest. He refused to speak of what he'd seen. The only detail leaked was that a man in a gray coat was waiting for him in the vacuum-locked corridor outside his ship's core reactor. Rumors made him into a myth, but those who had seen him knew better. He wasn't a ghost. He wasn't a machine. He was just a man, a human man, but one who didn't care about politics, didn't bow to hierarchy, and didn't operate under the illusion of invincibility. He had been broken once, during the war, but instead of shattering, he'd learned to weaponize the pieces. Late one night, in the emperor's private chamber, the old ruler finally spoke to him directly. They were alone, no court, no guards, just the two of them and the hum of the artificial gravity coils. "Why did they send you?" the Emperor asked, voice barely above a whisper. The human, seated near the wall, didn't look up. "Because I was the only one who said yes." The Emperor studied him. "You weren't their best." "No." "You weren't trained for diplomacy." "No." "Then why you?" The human finally looked up. "Because I volunteered." That was the thing about humans. The real danger wasn't what they were. It was what they chose to become. And this one? He had chosen something very specific. The Emperor leaned back and closed his eyes, and his bony hands resting atop each other. "I won't ask again, but I'm glad it was you." The human said nothing. The next week, a delegation from the Technarch Dominion arrived. They were known for disdain toward organics, especially humans. The lead diplomat, a living cluster of crystals suspended in anti-grav fields, transmitted directly into the court via waveform pulses. "We demand a technological share ratio of no less than 20%, or we withdraw from the alliance." Silence. The human, arms crossed, said, "Then withdraw." The crystal entity pulsed red, its frequency shifting. "This decision does not involve you, Warmblood." The human raised a brow. "Did you just call me Warmblood?" "It is an anatomical fact." "No," the human said, stepping forward. "It's an invitation." A long pause. Then the crystal flared with spikes of energy. "You cannot intimidate us. We do not fear you." "That's the difference between you and the rest of the room," he replied. They learned. Moments later, one of the Technarch's floating escorts sparked, lost balance, and detonated in midair. No one saw how. No footage showed interference. But every other Technarch device in the chamber dimmed for exactly 6 seconds before rebooting in full retreat mode. The Emperor never blinked. The human went back to his post. He didn't smirk, didn't nod, didn't take a victory lap. He never did. What unnerved everyone the most wasn't the violence, or the power, or the mystery. It was that there was no joy in it, no thrill, just duty. He didn't crave war. He didn't relish fear. He just believed in consequences. And everyone, from the lowest courier to the highest sovereign, understood one thing. If you messed with the Emperor, you dealt with him. Not the palace guards, not the Imperial fleet, just him, and that was enough. The day it all came to a head began like any other, with silence. The court was in session, the Emperor seated in his towering throne, draped in centuries of power and ritual. The ministers flanked him in their assigned stations. Nothing moved in the great hall except the shimmering light filtering through the high stained glass domes. And as always, he stood one step below the throne, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room not with suspicion, but with certainty. He already knew. It started with a flicker, barely noticeable. One of the chandeliers above dimmed a fraction too long. To most, it was a glitch. To him, it was a signature, a signal. The assassination attempt wasn't elegant. It wasn't poetic or cunning. It was a full-scale assault, the kind only desperation could justify. The lights shut off. Instantly, soundproofing systems kicked in, designed to mute any explosive breach to protect the inner sanctum. But they hadn't counted on him being the breach. 6 figures descended from above, each genetically enhanced and cloaked in refractive armor. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't threaten. They just dropped in with the confidence of professionals. They were dead before they hit the floor. The human didn't wait. He moved like gravity bowed for him. In 3 seconds, he'd disabled 5 and broken the 6th through a support column. Still, the real attack came from below. The floor beneath the Emperor cracked open, and 2 sleek projectiles launched into the chamber, trailing electromagnetic pulses designed to shut down every defense system within 10 meters. Everyone ducked. Everyone except the human. He leapt into the path, grabbing one of the missiles mid-flight. The second struck his shoulder and exploded in a flash of white-blue light. The throne shook. The guards scrambled. A siren blared. When the smoke cleared, he was still standing, his coat half-burned, chest plate cracked, and his left arm limp at his side. But his eyes were the same. Cold, focused, alive. Behind him, the Emperor was untouched. The assassin force wasn't finished. From the eastern gate, a swarm of micro-drones poured in like smoke. forming an attack wave meant to liquefy the throne in seconds. The human stepped forward and triggered a device on his belt. A sound followed, low, barely audible, like a whisper wrapped in thunder. Every drone paused mid-air. Then they reversed direction. The entire swarm turned and shot toward the gate they had entered from, where they detonated, collapsing the archway and trapping the rest of the infiltration team behind sealed rubble. 3 seconds of stillness followed. Then the last attacker emerged from behind the Emperor's throne, a blade in hand, an energy disruptor humming at his hip. He moved quickly, too quickly. The human was faster. With one hand still damaged, he used the other to catch the blade mid-swing. Metal shrieked. Sparks rained. He didn't counterattack. He just stared at the attacker, his grip tightening slowly. "You made it too complicated," he said. The attacker trembled. "I've been standing here for 5 years, watching, listening. You think I wouldn't know who was planning this?" The blades snapped in his hand like dry twigs. The human let the attacker go, not out of mercy, but because he wasn't the punishment. He was the warning. The Emperor finally spoke, his voice soft. "Enough." The human stepped back. "They're all neutralized. Except the one who planned it." The hall went quiet again. The ministers glanced at each other, alarmed. The Emperor raised a single finger, pointing toward the High Minister's gallery. Minister Harzak, a towering, four-eyed being whose hands never trembled until now. "You thought no one would trace the signal," the Emperor said. "But he did." The human walked forward once more, each step louder than the last. Harzak backed away, panic blooming across his features. "You shouldn't have used the chandelier signal," the human said. "That was used by the Kalmari during the Redshift Revolt. You assumed I wouldn't remember." "I had no choice," Harzak barked. "He's just one human. We've built empires. We were gods before they learned to crawl." The human stood before him now. "Then maybe that's your problem," he said. "You never stopped thinking we were crawling." With one motion, he ripped the minister's communicator from his throat and crushed it. "You're done." The court guards moved in. Harzak didn't resist. The rest of the ministers stood frozen. They weren't sure what law had just been enforced. There was no precedent, no protocol. But it didn't matter. The room followed one law now. His. In the aftermath, the Emperor convened a private council. "You've saved me more times than I can count," he said. "But this was the first time they came so close." "I know. I won't ask you to stay longer." "I'm not leaving." The Emperor leaned forward. "You've given everything, human. What more can I ask?" The human uncrossed his arms for the first time in days. "I'm not here for you," he said. "I'm here because they still think someone might try again." "And if they don't?" He paused. "Then I'll stay to make sure they don't forget why." The Emperor nodded. "What is it you want? After all this?" "Nothing." "You must want something." The human turned to the high glass dome above them. Earth was a speck now, far away. But its memory lived in his posture, in his scars, in his silence. "I want no one to make the mistake of thinking we're not watching." And so he remained. Years passed. Delegations came and went. Wars started and ended. Empires rose and fell. But he stood, one step below the throne, watching, always watching. And while the galaxy debated politics, strategy, and dominance, only one fact remained unchallenged. The Emperor was safe, because his only guard was human.